Good morning, River of Life Community Fellowship. It is time for our Tuesday edition of Sunday School, where we have a short daily devotion since we can't meet for Sunday School. This last Sunday, we talked about service. How is a spiritual discipline that is where we show God's love, show the love of God that is in us to others through our actions. And we talked about how there are three ways to serve: with our time, with our talents, and with our treasures. And we talked about how that's supposed to look in our life and all that stuff. If you missed the message or you want a refresher, there's a link in the description. You can click on it, you can watch the message and find out what God tells us about service. But this week, I wanted to go through different verses in the Bible where we see service in action, where we see people either using their time or their talents or their treasures to serve God. Now, today we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 4. And to set up the story, Nehemiah is the explanation of how the wall in Jerusalem was rebuilt after the exile. And it's just a really cool story about how God working and God providing and God just opening all these doors and all these great things happening. But one thing that always happens whenever God is working is there is always opposition. Always. There's always an opposition to the work of God. So when God was doing this work in Jerusalem, there was opposition. And the opposition at this point in Nehemiah chapter 4 were ready to get violent. They planned to attack the workers while they were working on the wall, to rush in and start killing them and stop the work through violence. But Nehemiah and the people in Judah, they found out about the plans, and so they prepared. And this is how they prepared. In Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 16, "From that day on, half my servants worked on construction, half held their spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail, and the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah, who were building on the wall. Those who carried burdens were loaded in such a way that each labored on the work with one hand and held his weapon in the other. And each of the builders had his own sword strapped to his side while he built. The man who sounded the trumpet was beside me. And I said to the nobles and those officers and the rest of the people, the work is great and widely spread, and we are separated on the wall from far. In the place where you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us." And this is a good part. Verse 21, "So we labored at the work, and half of them held the spears from the break of dawn until the stars came out. And I said to the people at that time, let every man and his servant pass the night within Jerusalem." And so what we see here is like, okay, so they know about this attack's coming. So basically everyone arms themselves. But what we see is we see laborers. Like, we see people who are serving with their time. They're giving their time to this building. They're giving this time to carry the burdens and stuff, and they do it in such a way that they can still hold a weapon or whatever. But then half the people are just holding weapons and they're standing guard. And so they're also serving with their time. They're using their time to protect the rest of the people working. And so half the people guarded, half the people worked, and all of them were serving with their time. And as I mentioned yesterday, it's important to note that our service should never be something that we feel compelled to do or obligated to do, or pushed into doing. It really should be something that we do out of the joy that flows through us, out of our love for God, and out of our love and our thankfulness for His grace in our lives. And I think that's what we see here. These men in Jerusalem were there, and they were watching God restore what was lost in the exile. They were watching God work to restore them as the people of God. They were no longer exiled. They were no longer forgotten by God. They were remembered and returned home, and they were watching God do amazing things. They were watching God rebuild this wall around Jerusalem. They were watching God restore the honor of this great city. And so that gave them a sense of joy and of hope. And it was through that they served, that they gave their time. And so, as was yesterday, my encouragement to you is that if you feel compelled, if you feel obligated to serve, you need to step back and seek God on that. Remember what it is that He's done in your life. Remember how He's worked, so that you can come and serve out of gratefulness, out of joy, and out of just that love of God that is in you, and you can serve through that rather than obligation. Because serving because you're obligated to is no fun. There's no joy in it. There's no hope in it. But when you're serving out of the grace of God that flows in your life, out of the love of God, out of the remembrance of what God has done in your life, there's joy in that. There's joy in being able to say, I'm doing this because God loved me enough to die for me. I'm doing this because the love of God is in me, and I need to show it to other people through my actions. And so that's my encouragement to you. And that's what we see here in Nehemiah, that these people were watching God work, and there was a joy and a hope in them that caused them to serve out of hope, serve out of joy, serve out of thankfulness. And so my encouragement to you is to make sure that you are doing that. Make sure that you are seeking God and being full of His Spirit so that you can serve in such a way that honors Him more than, because when you're just doing it because you're obligated, that's not really honoring to Him. It's not really honoring to His sacrifice. So make sure that you're serving in a way that honors Him and brings glory to His name and helps other people see His love. And that is such an important thing. That is what we were created to do, to bring glory to God and to help others know about God so they can bring glory to His name. So that's my encouragement to you. Seek God in all that you do. Spend time in prayer. Work on these spiritual disciplines to grow and maintain your faith. And don't forget to serve. Serve out of the love and joy that God has placed in your hearts. Thanks, and God bless.